Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TVC Spotlight. I'm your host, Tamara Lopez, and today I'm here with Shay Invidiata, and she is going to be speaking with us about Free Them, an organization that she founded. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me about why you founded this. How did you get into the industry?
Well, back in 2003, I was living in the United States in Honolulu, and I started my university education there. And I was confronted with literally this issue of prostitution at my doorstep. Where I was in a safe community. It wasn't like I was in a bad neighborhood. But at night, with all the tourists, you would have these girls and young women walking the strip. And I started to get engaged because this was my neighborhood. So I thought, if I have to see these women and young girls every day, I'm either going to reject them or embrace them. And I also had two girls that I went to university with who dropped out of school. Actually, they got kicked off the dance team because they had started stripping. And I started to think, how do two girls that come from an affluent background start stripping, get kicked off of the dance team, and then within weeks I saw them out on the streets, and that's how I had heard about their story. And I thought, if this is a choice-based industry, as many of us know it to be, then why is it that these two girls that I knew couldn't get out? And so I started to explore this industry, choice-based industry that we called prostitution. And when I started to engage with the women and young girls, I started to realize that the word prostitute, which we equate so much with choice, is widely misrepresented, and the more correct word to be using is prostituted. And it's amazing how when you add two letters on to the end of a word, how it can change the meaning. And when you learn the word prostituted, you learn the word human trafficking, and your world is rocked forever because you're opened up into this world of human trafficking, and you're told that 27 million people are in slavery today. And that blew my mind. 27 million people in slavery? There's 34 million people in the population of Canada. So it's like our whole entire nation in some form of slavery. And it blew my mind away that our world wasn't talking about it. And so that's where my journey began, was back in 2003. And from there, it's been this process of learning about the industry, engaging with the women, working on the streets. And I was living abroad at the time, and I ended up moving to the west side of BC, in Canada, of course. And then I was over in Australia for a bit. And so when I came back to Canada in 2009, I founded this organization, Free Them, in 2010, in January.
Now, what do you hope to achieve from this organization that you founded, Free Them?
For us, I strongly believe that if you're not aware of an issue or a problem, then you can't fight it. You can't solve it. And there are many great organizations that are working on what I call the other side of the coin, so doing the rescuing, rehabilitation, prosecution, which we need. But when you look at Canada especially, there's no education, there's no awareness, and there are great groups that are doing the best that they can to raise that awareness. But for Free Them, that is our heartbeat, that's our mandate, is raising as much awareness and as much education as possible, whether it's through speaking engagements, whether it's being on amazing Cogeco TV like we are here this morning, to raise this issue. Whether it's we do public events a lot in the city of Toronto, or whether it's in St. Catharines or in Oakville, or we're kind of all over in that golden horseshoe. And so raising that awareness is the voice. And that's, for us, is the most important spot to start. And then from there, we partner with amazing law enforcement. So you're going to meet later on today one of our partners from Walk With Me, where they're front lines and they're working with police, working with the victims. And so we partner on that. We let the experts do what they're best at, and we work at trying to become experts in raising awareness and education.
So give me, if I didn't know what human trafficking was, what exactly would you consider the definition of human trafficking to be?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, and the UN, you can go to their website and it's a paragraph about this big. So okay. I'm not going to give you and all of your viewers that definition, but simply to put it in more English terms, human trafficking is the harboring, transferring, taking a human being and withholding them against their will, whether it's domestically, like it could be in this building where somebody is being kept against their will and being forced to do things that they don't want to do, or they were misled. So, let's, for example, You've got a woman who comes to Canada to become a nanny. She thinks she's coming here for domestic work, and then her passports are taken, her documentation's taken, her visas, and she's forced to be in a location to do something that she didn't sign up for. There's a few other realms that are considered to deem a situation of human trafficking. What's used to keep that victim there? Is it fraud? Is it fear, abuse, torture? A lot of these tactics are considered to consider a case as human trafficking.
Now, would you say that it affects only women, younger? What is the age group that you've seen or have heard of, obviously, through your organization?
The vast majority is women and children. 80% of trafficked victims are women and children globally. When you look at the industry as a whole, forced labor and forced sexual exploitation are your two most prominent, especially here in Canada. So we have a lot of men that are brought over from Eastern Europe who are forced to work in the migrant workers in agriculture, construction, and then of course women coming over for domestic work as well, where they're forced, whether it's nannies or to be just a maid in house. But oftentimes the women and children are sexually exploited as well. So even if it is for forced labor, it crosses over with sexual exploitation.
Now, I believe on your website you had mentioned something about ways women can get out of the industry or get out of it somehow. What do they do for themselves, way to empower themselves to maybe get out of the situation that they're in?
And you'll hear later as well, again from Kat from Walk With Me, each victim that becomes a survivor is a different case. And so there's common stories, and sometimes it's a couple weeks to a year where you're having to work with a victim to counsel and bring them back to a point of gaining self-dignity and worth. And so for us, we desperately try to not see these girls relapse and go back into the industry. When drugs are used as a huge tactic of gaining control over the victim and dependency, that's the hardest thing to break, because when they're not getting that fix, you'll hear stories of the girls leaving the shelters, leaving the safe homes, and going back to the streets or going back to their trafficker because they need that fix. So we do have great counselors and partners that we work with that are there to support the victim and staying with them through that process, so that when they are wanting that fix or they are feeling lonely or not feeling worthy of themselves, that they're with somebody to encourage them and to feed that inspiration and encouragement back into them.
That's absolutely fantastic. Mm-hmm. How else does Free Them get their word out? Now, you've mentioned things like education. You go into schools. Do you host events as well? Ways people can actually know that this organization exists? Mm-hmm.
Like you said, we do many different events throughout the year. We also do different campaigns throughout the year. Right now, we're in February, and so we've got our Freedom February campaign, which is 29 days we'll give you 29 things you can do throughout the month to raise awareness on human trafficking. So depending on what time it is during the year, we'll do the campaigns. We work a lot with the media. I've got a fantastic PR team within Free Them, and we're constantly sending out press releases, press statements. We work federally with MP Joy Smith, who's Canada's leading politician that fights human trafficking, with new bills that she's coming forth with or new motions. So we'll very frequently give statements in endorsing her motions or the bills. So we do work closely with the politicians in that regard. You also hear later this afternoon from MP Terrence Young, who's in the riding for Oakville.
Okay.
And he's a fantastic supporter of not just Free Them, but the cause. Anytime I call Terrence and say, Terrence, we've got this conference on human trafficking that we're hosting, and we need somebody from the Conservative Party to sit there because we've got the Liberals, we've got the NDPs. Terrence will come out, even if it's not in his riding. The last time I had asked him to come out to something, it was all the way in York region. But because he believes so strongly in the cause, and being a man on this issue, I am so grateful for it, because you'll hear a lot of women easily jump up to support this, and men not so quickly on this issue.
Right, usually they're more the ones that are the holders of the individuals, of course, or the people that purchase women for other means, of course, and that's why it's different. It's nice to have a man, as you're mentioning.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. Are you working towards for the future the new bill or anti-harassment anti-human trafficking bills that are coming out?
We are. There's two bills. One that was unanimously passed, which is so exciting for us. I was actually in Ottawa, and Mrs. Smith had tabled her new bill, Bill C-310, which is going to, and you can go to her website to get the full explanation, it's joysmith.ca. But in short, it's a bill that looks to expand what the definition of exploitation is in Canada. Right now it's a limited definition, and we need to allow the courts to have more flexibility to prosecute traffickers and pimps under the term of exploitation.
Okay.
And so we're looking to expand that definition. And then furthering with Bill C-310, we're also wanting Canadians to realize that when they go abroad, you're still Canadian. So what you do abroad, if you have sex with a minor, if you partake in trafficking in persons at all outside of our borders, you will be prosecuted under Canadian legislation that we're looking to pass that bill. So that's one thing that we're doing right now. The other,
that is amazing, actually.
It is. It's so exciting, and it's greatly needed. It's really about time. I think if you're going to wear the Canadian badge outside of our country, then you should be upheld to legislation
standards.
And Canadian standards.
Of course.
Absolutely. So that's one. The other one is Mrs. Smith has just put forth a motion last week to create a national anti-human trafficking awareness day, which we're hoping to have it be February 22nd to keep in line with the Freedom February campaign.
Of course.
So that's also another thing that we're pushing for right now.
Well, that's absolutely amazing. I want to thank you, Shay, for being on the show with us today. And
Thank you.
We have a website that we can visit, of course?
Absolutely. freedom.ca.
I'm sitting here now with Terrence Young, MP of Oakville. Welcome.
Thank you, Tamara. Great to be here.
Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Pleasure.
Do tell me, what is your involvement exactly with Freedom?
Well, I first found out about the organization through Shay in Vidiana. I guess it was approximately a year ago. And I saw the work that Shay was doing in a number of ways, Shay and her team. First of all, I went to an event, a fundraiser at King's Christian Collegiate, where I believe they raised $6,000 to help raise awareness of this very serious problem. I was so impressed with these young people. It was actually a birthday party for 4 teenage boys, and that's what they made their birthday into, to raise money, to raise awareness of this problem. And then I was at an event at York University, which was once again, raising awareness and teaching people about the seriousness of the problem. And they asked me to speak and just give a little history of what the government of Canada had been doing legislative-wise. I'm trying to think what else. A number of other things, but I always go to the website. Oh, I read the book Human Chains. There was an event in Ottawa, and the book Human Chains came out, and so I read that. But I guess primarily my efforts have been in supporting my colleague Joyce Smith. And Joyce Smith she's kind of like my hero, because when I arrived in Ottawa in 2008, she was already in the process of trying to get her private member's bill passed. Now, there's a tradition in Ottawa that when you're in the government, you don't introduce private members' bills on a justice matter because they're very complex, and a lot of the times the lawyers have different views on it. But Joyce Smith felt so strongly about this because her son is an RCMP officer who worked on these cases and taught her how horrible they are and has to work with the victims. And she told me one day, we went to lunch and I got a chance to talk to her. She said, if I didn't act on this, I couldn't live with myself. That's how important she felt it was. So she introduced her first private member's bill, which would give minimum 5-year penalties for anyone convicted of human trafficking in Canada. And she was discouraged from all sides on doing it, and she just put her head down and kept pushing forward on it. And last June, that private member's bill became law. And that was just a huge milestone. And if you read in the paper about members of parliament, they say they're nobodies and they don't do anything and they just do what they're told. And that's not true. And the evidence of that is Joyce Smith's private member's bill and her determination to get it through. She's kind of a hero on Parliament Hill for just sticking to her guns and getting that done.
That's absolutely amazing. And that's the most recent bill that was passed, of course, last year.
Yes, in June. It went through final reading and became law, received royal assent in June last year. It was like 5-year journey Joy was on.
That's absolutely amazing, though, that it was passed. Now,
yes.
Being an MP in Halton, why do you find that this is an important issue? Again, some people believe, it's not going to come to my doorstep, I'm in Halton. Why do you believe that is important for supporting it here?
Well, it's important because Canada plays a leading role in many ways in the world as a democracy where we have free speech and human rights and the rule of law. So even if it didn't happen in Canada, it's important for Canada to speak out. As well, we have the wealth and we have individuals here who are devoted in the faith communities, as I said, who are devoted to make a difference, and they raise money or they pay for air tickets themselves. And they've gone to Cambodia and elsewhere to try and search out and find relief for and a safe place for the victims to live. So in that sense, it's important to every Canadian. But it's important to Canadians as well and people in Halton because it's happening in Canada. And people just find that so hard to believe that there's human trafficking in Canada. There have been a couple of convictions. There, I think, probably at any given time, about 40 or 50 cases before the courts. But the traffickers are still getting away with it to a degree, and so we're looking at changes to legislation to broaden the definition so that we can stop these horrific crimes.
Now, is there some sort of action plan that's coming up, or a national action plan regarding human trafficking that you may be working on?
Yeah. Well, it's part of a whole range of things. In fact, this is something where parliamentarians are working on it and supporting Joy's work and others, and there's a parliamentary action plan. And our government has done a number of things since 2006 to bring the issue forward. The recommendations came from, on the action plan, were actually originated, I think, from Joy Smith. I'm just reading here, Connecting the Dots, a proposal for a national action plan to combat human trafficking, and it had 14 recommendations. And so government members are working on it, but really this is something that's driven to a large degree by volunteers, people in the faith communities, et cetera, and people like Shay and Vidyata. And I have to tell you, I'm so proud to have Shay in my writing. And I'll tell you a quick funny story. Several months back, I prepared a member statement for the House. You get every couple of months, they give you 1 minute to say whatever you want. So I always try and highlight something good that's happening in the writing. And so, but I forgot to call Shay or have my office call her and say, look, Terence is going to be doing a statement about you in the House today, until the absolute last minute. So we tried to find her that morning. They said, well, she's in Ottawa right now. She's working with Joy Smith. She's in Joy Smith's office, which is in another building on the Hill. So we got the message across. So I read a 1 minute statement of congratulations to Shay and Vidyata for the work she does. And so I want to announce today, actually, I'm happy to announce it here, that I'm going to be nominating Shay for the Queen's Medal this year. And this is the 60th anniversary of the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And so members of Parliament are allowed to nominate people who've made a significant contribution to Canada. So I'll be nominating Shay and Vidyata for her work, and not just the work she has done, but the work she's doing and the work that she continues to do.
That is absolutely amazing.
I think if I nominate her, knowing what she's accomplished, I think she'll receive it as well. That's up to the Governor General, but I believe she will.
I mean, having met her and gone through her story this morning, it's absolutely amazing, and that's absolutely fantastic. And